explanation. So that is what, that Q&A portion is for. Be respectful and supportive of others, even if you disagree with their opinion. The fifth is that we are going to be taking an all teach, all learn approach today. So that means that, we all want to teach one another and learn from one another. And that's why we want this webinar to be very interactive. And then finally, this webinar is being recorded. So if you, don't say anything you wouldn't want to be on the recording, basically in the chat, because we might read it out. So now that we have covered that, I am going to briefly discuss Iris House and the Love Your Life project. So for those of you who are unfamiliar, Iris House is a nonprofit organization that is located in Harlem in New York City. And we provide comprehensive preventative, educational, and supportive services to women, family, and other underserved populations who are impacted by HIV/AIDS and other health disparities. So at Iris House, I oversee and coordinate the Love Your Life project. And I just want to give you some background on that because we're going to be referencing it frequently throughout the content of today's webinar. So in September of last year, Iris House was named a grantee for ViiV Healthcare's Positive Action for Women initiative. If you are unfamiliar, ViiV Healthcare is a company that specializes in developing and delivering new treatment options for people living with HIV. And in addition to creating antiretroviral medications, ViiV actually supports a number of community initiatives in which they collaborate with CBOs and nonprofits like us to try to address gaps in services and care. So the purpose of the Positive Action for Women initiative is to promote community collaborations that break down isolation and stigma specifically for cis and transgender women of color living with HIV. For our Positive Action for Women project at Iris House, we launched the Love Your Life project. And the goal of Love Your Life was to create a national virtual support group for women living with HIV/AIDS in order to increase their engagement in care and hopefully increase their rates of viral load suppression. So we've been working on this project for a little over a year, and in that time we have launched 2 national virtual support groups. One group is in English and the other is in Spanish. And the groups are held once a month using this Zoom platform that we're actually using right now. So women have the option to either call in using their phones or to get on using a webcam in their computer. So each month the facilitators come up with new topics for the ladies to discuss. And some of the topics we've discussed thus far include stigma, family, we've talked about the Me Too movement, and we've also talked about self-care. So women from all across the country are calling in to participate, and we actually have women calling in from 9 different states currently, which is really fantastic, a great diverse group of people. And we think these virtual support groups are very significant, and we're going to talk a little bit later in the webinar about some of the data that backs up the definite need for them. So if you are looking on the computer right now, you can see on your screen there is a flyer for the Love Your Life project. I'm going to be sending this out to everyone after the webinar, but if you know anyone who may benefit or you want more information on it, you can definitely contact me. My contact information is on the flyer, and any women who want to register just have to go through a very simple registration process. So now I am going to be introducing our speaker, Vanessa Johnson. So Vanessa is the co-owner of the Washington, D.C.-based Ribbon Consulting Group. So Ribbon is a minority women-owned business specializing in organizational growth and development, health-related programming and services, and civic and community engagement. Vanessa's career accomplishments include 34 years of creating and scaling up responsive community and public health services and activities. And in this pursuit, she's dedicated 20 years to developing and providing capacity building assistance in the area of HIV with a special emphasis on women living with HIV. So she's an experienced facilitator, she's a nationally certified trainer, and she is a graduate of Temple University School of Law. So thank you for being on the call today, Vanessa. One second, I think you're muted.
Thank you.
There you go, perfect.
Thank you, Veronica, and welcome everyone. I'm very happy to be here, and I am going to start us off with looking at the results of our poll that we asked you to participate in. So as you notice on the slide, the majority of you are already facilitating on-site support groups, and that there is a great interest from you. You all indicated in the poll there's a great interest in you being able to facilitate virtual support groups, or at least exploring the idea of conducting a virtual support group. And then just a little about less than 50% of you are not facilitating a support group or are interested in doing so. And I think that's really great because, as you will know in the next slide, support groups have been very instrumental in keeping women engaged in care and helping with isolation. So what were your common expectations in terms of you participating on today's webinar? You are interested in learning about group dynamics, particularly conflicting personalities. And if you have been involved in support groups, that probably does not need an explanation, but there'll be a little activity that we can do where we can all share and learn from each other. There will be a little bit discussion about recruitment and retention. We may have to do another webinar to explore that and unpack that more fully. And as Veronica has given you information, you've been able to learn a little bit more about Iris House's Love Your Life project. And some of you are very much interested in just enhancing your overall group facilitation skills. It's my hope that at the end of this webinar or in the chat box, you will let us know whether or not you're interested in continuing a learning group for support group facilitation. I think that support group facilitation skills have to be honed on a regular basis, and that we can do that as a community. And whether it's a small community or a large community, I think we can learn from each other. Sometimes it can be verbal. We might have additional webinars, maybe twice a year, but other times it could be just chat, and we're just in our community box, just discussing our experiences. So we'll talk about that more towards the end of the webinar. Next slide. Thanks. All of you know the importance of support groups. For me, as a woman living with HIV with over 30 years of experience living with HIV, support groups have been very instrumental in helping me navigate 4 areas that were really important in my life. One was when I was newly diagnosed. I attended an in-person support group that was run by Catholic Charities, and the women in that group literally saved my life in terms of my mental health. Because at the time, my physical health was very good, but my mental health was not good, having received that diagnosis. And just knowing that I wasn't alone was really important. And then as I moved along the HIV care continuum, which is now known as HIV care continuum, whatever challenges I was having along the way, I was able to bring those challenges to the support group and got some really good feedback and advice as to how I can problem solve those challenges and be able to stay engaged in care. I think I was probably more engaged in care when I was connected to a group than I was not. And then just dealing with the social determinants of health, like how do you get housing? How do you get around in terms of transportation? For me, it was how do I get disability? And some of the women in the group were of great help in terms of sharing their own experiences with those types of issues and just guiding me to resources that were helpful to me. And then I think it's just all about community. When we're able to discuss out loud who we are and what we're facing, I think that helps women decide on moving on with their lives. And a lot of us went back to work and are part of advocacy groups. So all the reasons I suggested that are important for support groups have been documented by many researchers. And so it's no surprise to me that when the funding decreased for support groups, whether that was through prevention funding or care funding, that the outcry, particularly from women living with HIV, was the reinstatement of support groups. Next slide. So let's talk about best practices for facilitating on-site support groups. This was a little difficult for me because I'll be transparent. It's been a while since I've run a support group, and even when I ran a support group, it was co-led with a clinician. So either someone with a master's in social work or an LCSW. And that's always, I find, to be really helpful. But if that's not where you are and you are doing this on a peer-to-peer level, or as a staff member who does not have these counseling credentials, it does not mean these support groups are not fully and highly functioning. Just means that when challenges come up, it may, whether or not you're able to talk to someone or get resources on how to deal with those situations might be a little bit more challenging. But what they found to be consistent in highly functioning quality support groups are the following 7 qualities: group management, group process, role modeling, awareness, that's self-awareness. Do you know yourself enough in terms of when do you step in, when you don't step in? Is it about you? Is it about the group? Your willingness to do this? Is this something you really want to do, or is this just part of your job responsibilities and you're just making it through that support group during that time? And are you personable? Are you agreeable? And can the participants feel that? And are you open? And that's a little difficult if a group is a mixed group where the facilitators are women who are not necessarily living with HIV, and where the majority of the women in the group are women living with HIV. It's not a barrier. It's a barrier that can be overcome depending on the willingness of those support group leaders to share a little bit about their own lives. And I know that's a little tricky because sometimes there's boundaries that have to be maintained and are demanded to be maintained by the organization as a whole, especially when it comes to liability and just safety issues. And that's something we could talk about on future calls. But where the focus of our session today is on group facilitation in terms of challenging personalities or conflict resolution. So Veronica, can you go to the next slide so I can just see where I am, because I can't tell. Okay, you can go back. Thank you. I just lost my spot for a moment. So I have some suggestions on how you might deal with challenging situations that may arise in the support group, in the context of the support group. And I'm gonna take my glasses off because I'm of that age now where I'm going back and forth between bifocals and single lens visuals, as some of you may know. So there's 4 things I would suggest if you're having an issue in the support group, is to think about mediation. And we'll talk about that when we get to the case study. But mediation is basically separating those out of the group who may be having difficulty with one another. And we'll talk about that more when we get to the case study. But you might want to think about first talking to them individually, and then asking both of them at that time that you're talking to them individually if they're willing to have you share what was said. And you would have to share that in the most positive way that you could figure out in terms of how each of these individuals might be feeling about one another. Because generally in support groups, it might be a conflict, as we said, about personalities. The second thing is then you would ask their permission if they could do that. The other thing that you might want to think about is rule of 3. Like giving each of the participants the opportunity of 3 times to have a moment. I call a moment where people are just out of sorts. They may be having a bad day, or they're just not feeling whatever's going on in the group. The other one is checking yourself, and checking yourself is about your own reactions and responses to what's happening in the group. And I'll give you an example. I'll share my own personal example of recent. I realized it was an eye-opener for me. I always know I was a rebellious person. And most of the time I'm rebelling against authority. I don't like being told what to do, if some of you can relate. However, the double-edged sword to that is I also don't like it, if I'm in an authority position, to people to challenge my authority. So is the conflict arising because I'm having that moment about someone pushing back on what I'm saying, or in terms of pushing back on my support? Or is it really that we're having a challenge among the participants? That's what I mean by checking yourself. And the other is about group cohesiveness. So the 3 tips I gave about mediation, rule of 3, and checking yourself is something that you might want to put in an engagement document. And I know Veronica is going to talk about that. I call it rules of engagement or group agreements, but actually having it written during your registration process so that folks in the group are well aware of what will happen. And I apologize for that. I'm in a downtown area. When conflicts arise in the group. And so I think I'll stop there until we get to the actual case study. Thanks.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Vanessa. So now that Vanessa has shared her tips on the on-site support group facilitation, and we're going to kind of be discussing those more and teasing those more out, as she said, when we talk about the case study, I am going to be talking about some best practices for facilitating virtual support groups. So I would just like to say that, you know, as Vanessa said in the registration, the majority of you indicated that you're looking to run on-site support groups or that you're currently running those groups. However, I would encourage you not to tune out the virtual support group discussion, just because a lot of the lessons I've learned through facilitating these groups are very easily applicable to all different types of groups. Furthermore, I would like to suggest that those of you who have on-site groups at your agencies seriously, strongly consider integrating virtual components into your on-site groups. So that might mean that, you know, you allow women from your city or your state to call into your on-site group or to Skype in or something like that. So I want to share a little bit of kind of data with you. As part of the Love Your Life project at the beginning of it earlier this year, we initiated a client needs survey. And so we had 210 women from all across the country participate in this survey. And we asked them some, you know, demographic questions, questions about their diagnosis, but we also asked them questions about groups that they are currently attending. And we asked them, you know, if you're not currently attending a support group for HIV, why aren't you attending that group? And so many women said that it's a real issue for me to get to the group. Some of the reasons they listed are, you know, I have multiple jobs and I just don't have time, or I have to take care of my children and I can't leave the house. A lot of other women said that they had mobility issues or mental health issues that prevented them from leaving home and getting to a group physically. A lot of women also discussed issues around disclosure and stigma and said, I don't want to go out into my community and show my face and disclose my status because people might talk about me. And then another huge issue for women was transportation. A lot of women who lived in rural areas in the country said, you know, I don't have a car. There's really no easy way for me to get to an on-site group. But interestingly, and I know we have a lot of people from New York City on the call, a lot of women who lived in New York City also complained about transportation. And I know, you know, we have the subway. It's not always the best, but it can generally get you where you need to go. But a lot of these women said, you know, I live really far out in Queens or in Brooklyn, and for me to get up to the group that I want to go to, it takes me about 2 hours, and I just don't have that kind of time, or that it's too expensive for me to get on the train. So adding some kind of virtual component to your on-site group would allow you to access those really vulnerable populations that are not able to get to your group otherwise for maybe some of the reasons that I just mentioned. And to preempt a question that I anticipate might come up around this, just because you have a virtual component or a calling component to your on-site group, I don't think that means that nobody is going to show up in person or that everyone's just going to start accessing it remotely. The reason I say that, again, is kind of backed up by the data we gathered. So in the client needs survey, we asked the women, you know, if you do attend a group, what is your favorite part about the group? And a lot of women noted that they really like that face-to-face interaction. They like getting out of their houses and seeing the other people in the group. So I don't think it would decrease your actual on-site agency participation. It would just allow more women to access it. So just something to keep in mind. So another best practices tip that I wanted to share around virtual support groups, and this is, again, very easily applicable to your on-site groups as well, is around data collection. So when we have women registering for the virtual support group, they undergo an intake process, and in that process, they answer, again, some basic demographic questions, questions about their diagnosis, their adherence to their medication, and also some questions about their stigma and any discrimination they're facing and feelings of isolation as well. So at the 6-month and 12-month mark, we are going to be re-administering these same questions in order to track the impact that the group has had on the women's lives. So we are also going to be asking them then at the 6-month and 12-month mark to kind of check in and say, how's the group going? What are the likes and the dislikes? So I think this is a really good way to track the quality of your group and to ensure that it's actually impactful. I think a lot of people start support groups at their agencies and they have really great intentions, but then they kind of just let them go and they don't really check in on them. And they think, oh, well, we have women participating, and, so that must mean that everything's going well. But going back to the client needs survey, a lot of the women who were currently participating in groups indicated that they didn't really like a lot of parts of the groups they were in. They were having problems with the facilitator or the topics or various other things, but that they still attended the group simply because they didn't know of any other groups in their area, or it was the easiest for them to get to, et cetera, et cetera. So just because you have a high attendance rate or a high rate of women who continually come to the group doesn't necessarily mean that it's operating optimally or positively impacting the lives of the people who are in the group. And this, kind of check-in and data collection is particularly important for the virtual groups because you're not really interfacing with the women one-on-one. So it's not as though I'm ever, kind of talking to these women, or I can kind of read their facial expression in the group necessarily if they're on the phone. So it's always good to have that check-in. And just from a funding perspective as well, when it comes to funders, showing is always better than telling. So if you have actual data that demonstrates, from being a part of this group, women's or individuals' adherence to their medication increased, or these individuals reported they had higher self-esteem or less experience of isolation. If you are able to show that to your funders, they'll be much more likely to potentially fund the group in the future. And then the last piece of best practices advice around the virtual support groups, and this one is very specific to the virtual groups that I wanted to mention, was to be very thoughtful about the platform on which you are hosting the virtual groups. So we thought about this for a long time, and the kind of 3 tenets that we were looking for in a platform were accessibility, anonymity, and security. And so we actually found that through the Zoom platform, and I'm just going to talk briefly about each of those. So one of the reasons we like Zoom so much is because it is accessible. So women who have, landlines, and that's the only connection they have to the outside world, they can call in on their landline. If they have a cell phone or a smartphone, then they can access it that way. And if they have sort of more advanced technology like a webcam, and they want to get on with the webcam, then they can do that as well. So if you are planning on having a virtual group or having a virtual component to your group, you need to really be thoughtful about how can I ensure that the people who I'm trying to target are able to access this group as easily as possible. The next thing we really focused on with platform selection was anonymity. I think one of the big appeals of a virtual group is that individuals can be more anonymous. They don't have to disclose their status. And the Zoom platform that we're using allows women to do that. So if they would like to disclose where they live and show their face on camera and everything, they are at liberty to do so. But alternatively, if they want to get on the phone and just use a pseudonym, they can. Or if they want to get on the phone and just mute the line and listen, they don't have to talk. And that's a really big appeal of, a virtual component. And again, if you have your on-site group, potentially adding a dial-in line or something like that would get those individuals who might be hesitant to come and show up in person. And then finally, the last thing that we were thinking about when we were selecting our platform was security. So as you all know, through going through this process of registering for the webinar, in order to access Zoom, you have to register and someone has to email you a link or a phone number and an access code, and there's sort of all these different obstacles. So it's not as though the number is just out there and kind of anyone can just get on the call. And we think that's really important for, in particular, the individuals who are on our virtual support groups, because like I said, a lot of them don't want to disclose their status. Another really good thing about that is, ensuring that you have a platform where you could potentially remove people and you can see who is on your calls. So whenever somebody logs into Zoom for the virtual support group, I can see their phone number or I can see their name if they put it in and they logged in on the computer. So if there's someone I don't recognize or someone who's causing problems, I can actually isolate them and remove them. So that's, a final kind of important thing to consider when you are thinking about a platform. And the very last thing that I would like to say about the virtual support groups, and again, this is very applicable to the on-site groups as well, is to talk a little bit about how we retain our women for the group. So we found that a lot of women were registering for the group, and we would have these really big registration numbers, but then nobody would actually get on the call. And I think a lot of people have that problem where, everyone seems very excited about the group when you tell them about it, but then nobody ends up showing up. So the only thing that we've found to be really effective is reminder calls. And they're very time consuming, I will give you that. When I have to do the reminder calls for the group, it takes me about 2 hours. So it's a big chunk of my day, but they are definitely worth it. So I actually call the women on the day that the group is happening, a few hours before it happens. We tried to do it a few days before, but we found that, again, people were just kind of forgetting. Things got in the way. I think it's particularly difficult, with a virtual group because, there's not really a chance to see them at your agency and remind them. But doing those calls on the day of the actual group has been very effective and has really increased our participation rates. And I think it makes it so that the women feel a little bit accountable. They know me, they talk to me once a month, and it's been really fantastic because now some of them are actually calling me when they can't attend the group. And the groups are by no means mandatory, obviously, but they'll give me a call and say, heads up, I just wanted to let you know I'm not able to get on today. So that's definitely a suggestion I would give you around both your on-site and your virtual groups, potentially utilizing reminder calls in order to increase participation and retention. All right, so we are now going to move on to the interactive part of the webinar. So again, we're going to have everyone, typing in the chat, and we are going to be hearing about a few common issues that facilitators face when they're facilitating support groups. So we are going to be hearing a case study from Vanessa in a little bit, but first we are actually going to have a facilitator from Iris House, Karen Lofton. She is going to get on the call and talk about a challenge that she has faced. She has been facilitating on-site support groups for women living with HIV here at Iris House for the past 2 years, and she's going to talk about challenges around selecting topics. So I'm going to have Karen come in right now.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Okay, are we on? Okay, great. Okay. Yeah, one of the challenges that I faced, and this actually facilitating a group was all new to me, but one of the challenges that I faced, and maybe it was because of the fact that the women that are in my group are seasoned women. Most of them are over 40, maybe even over 50. So this is like preaching to the choir. Most of the topics have been they've gone over or they've talked about, and I think they just wanted some new materials. Just looking for new materials. I looked through folders just to, for past support groups to see, what the topics were, and they seemed to just be recycled. So I found that a lot of times, there were just redundant topics, anxiety, depression, how to deal with grief, how to deal with, your emotions. So when I kind of ran dry or, out of gas a little bit, I said, what am I going to do? I don't have anything more to talk about. We've gone over this a few times already, and the group is continuous. It's the same women, and they've been coming almost for the past 2 years. So what I did was I just said, you know what? Each woman in the group will pick a topic that they're passionate about and they think, that they can do some research on, and that will be your presentation for the group. So we've been doing that for maybe now about 3 weeks. We've been having one particular woman address diabetes. One did their presentation on mental illness, and it kind of like gave them a chance to to run the group themselves more or less, or a chance to feel like they're really a part of it, and that they're not always given something given a topic that they want to talk about, as opposed to addressing their own needs. Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Karen. I really appreciate that. So I just wanted to see if the chat has any reactions to what Karen just discussed. And if you have had similar experiences where you're facilitating for long-term survivors and there might be some issues with them kind of getting bored with topics like Karen said. And if you have any, questions or anything you did to kind of mitigate some of those challenges. So I'll give everyone a few moments to just type in the chat. And Vanessa, feel free to chime in with any opinions you have as well.
Okay, thanks.
All right, so Tarima says, I think Karen's suggestion is a great idea, and I definitely agree. You know, we always hear from the women that they want to be more involved, so absolutely.
Yeah. Game night. What is a game? Did you see that one?
Yeah, so we have another individual who's saying breaking up educational component with game night or something that is sort of breaks up the monotony. Absolutely. That's another comment we got from the women a lot. And I think Karen is nodding and agreeing that, you know, they don't want to just hear about HIV over and over again. You don't want to talk about your viral load and your medication every single day. Talking about things that are a little bit more fun or sort of ancillary topics like family and relationships and things like that can be very important as well. Absolutely.
Oh.
So any other feedback from the chat on Karen's challenge? Anything else that people have done around kind of mixing up topics?
You have another one?
Yep, absolutely. Another one saying sharing special events. Definitely a good idea for sure. Yeah, or letting members, so we have another individual, Christian, saying letting members share their story. Absolutely. So that's another good idea, is having somebody just come up and if they feel comfortable, just kind of telling their story. That can, you know, elicit responses from the other women because maybe they've had similar experiences. So that is another great suggestion to kind of break up the monotony. Absolutely.
And also you could do role playing with that. If they're not willing to share their exact story, you could make the facilitator could come up with a story and have the group problem solve that themselves. Sometimes folks want to be in the role that you're always playing, where they're the lead and they're the case manager. And if they were the case, you could play. What if I was the case manager? What would I do? And it could be a made up story, so that folks can figure out how to do that themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the chat is echoing that, you know, Vanessa, that sometimes it's better to put a person in a role play because they might be a little bit more willing to open up about their own story in that situation. And then we had another individual, Alonzo, who mentioned guest speakers. That's another really fantastic way to kind of spice things up. So maybe having topic experts come in or something like that. Absolutely. So Vanessa, any other thoughts on this, or are we ready to move on to the case study with Deborah?
Oh, we're ready. Yeah, we're ready. Thank you. And thank you all for all your comments. Okay.
Yes, absolutely. And someone also mentioned just before we move on, you know, creating some sort of, you know, art-like activity or like a comic book or something like that. That's another really, really great thing that a person can do, you know, including any sort of like arts or crafts or creative exercises. I know here at Iris House, you know, sometimes people come in and I believe they've had them do some cooking classes and things like that as well. Karen also mentions that they do vision boards. Which is really fantastic and another kind of creative, interactive way to get women to open up that sort of breaks up that monotony. Absolutely. All right, perfect. So we are then going to move on to the next case study. All right.
Can I ask
Would
a
you
question?
like me to? Yeah, absolutely.
I just want to ask a question before you read the case study. What about, will we be able to take these recommendations and we'll be able to save these and put them together and just
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So as I mentioned, this webinar is being recorded, but the chat is also going to be saved. So at the end of this, I'm going to put together kind of a little cheat sheet, just a brief outline of some of the things we talked about today, because we've got a lot of really great suggestions, and some of them are still coming in, including meeting outside or meeting in a new location to kind of spice things up as well.
And before you read, also I want to remind the folks who are participating that we're really looking for you all to utilize this opportunity as a shared learning experience. So it's not so much that I will have solutions or recommendations, but really looking for you all to share your own lived experiences with running support groups, or even if you haven't run one, things that may come to mind. So I know Veronica's really going to be looking for you all in that chat box. Thanks.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, so the next situation we're going to go over is kind of a little bit of a case study, and then we're going to ask how you would react to the situations. This one's a little bit more complicated, so I will read out Deborah's story to everyone. It is also up there on the slide in case you'd like to read along. So Deborah is a 40-year-old cisgender woman of African descent who was diagnosed with HIV 6 months ago. Upon diagnosis, she was immediately brought to a local HIV clinic. Deborah was extremely stressed out and fearful at the clinic, and during her intake there, she informed the case manager that she is in a long-term relationship with a man who is the father of her 2 children. So she's now considering starting HIV care and treatment, but only if she can get over her fear about her partner and other family members finding out she is positive. So her patient navigator recommends that she attend a local support group to try to help her deal with all this. So Deborah now regularly attends the support group, but at every session she tearfully talks about her living circumstances and is unable to be emotionally present for the other women. The group has been supportive thus far, but now they're indicating to you, the group facilitator, that they're starting to become frustrated with her and are considering not attending the group anymore as a result. As a matter of fact, a very popular, prominent member of the group doesn't attend the next session, and she contacts you individually and informs you that she is not coming back until something is done about Deborah. So as a group facilitator, what do you think you would do in this situation? So you can type your answers in the chat, and then Vanessa and I will be responding.
And while you're doing that, I saw some other suggestions in regards to the in-person support group, which is meeting outside. That's always a great, just changing the environment makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely.
And more of the art was vision boards. Yeah. I think a lot of those suggestions might help us with Deborah, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
So while we're waiting for you all to enter in the chat, some of the suggestions that I have, and there's really only 2. Sometimes when you're mixing newly diagnosed women with long-term survivors, it can be like oil and water, because long-term survivors have probably gone through that and have gone through their own experiences with that being newly diagnosed. So what I would do, the first thing I would do is contact the opinion leader, because that person's most likely the opinion leader of the group, and just tell her how valuable she has been, how valuable her participation is, and that she really is a wanted member of the group, but also to remind her at one point in time she was newly diagnosed too, and that we have to be a little bit patient about what's going on with members, particularly this new member of the group. And and this is where I need help too, like exactly what is it that she needs to remain a part of the group? Is it that we only give Deborah so much time? Is it that when Deborah starts crying that we ensure that we have someone else that's able to take Deborah aside and attend to her needs while the group needs can still be met? And I'm posing these as questions because I'm not exactly sure. I've been in this situation a couple of times as a person has watched other people react to that group member, and myself with that frustration, like how many times are we going to have to listen to this? You know that feeling if you've been in a support group. But yeah, once again, I asked really what's going on with you, and what is it that this person is bringing up in you that is causing you not to not want to be in that group anymore?
Yeah, so I think that's a great point, Vanessa, is potentially, taking aside that individual who decided not to come to the groups anymore. But another suggestion that I'm seeing from multiple people in the chat is kind of trying to find some extra help for Deborah. So whether that be sending her to counseling or having some sort of a peer worker talk to her, or just having some sort of a one-on-one conversation with her, speaking with her privately. Some individuals said assessing her for therapy and other supportive services that might mitigate her need to overshare in the group. So that one-on-one conversation could definitely be helpful outside of the context of the group. Kenneth also recommended that maybe would be a time to take Deborah out of the group. And this is something you and I were talking about before, Vanessa. Sometimes you do have to make that hard call and that hard decision and say, maybe this isn't the right thing for you right now.
Exactly. I agree with that. Y'all have really good suggestions. Thank you very much. Can you talk a little, well, I know you all are just in chat, but can you just chat a little more about the health home services? Alonzo, what do you mean? Because that might really be a good suggestion. Like I know having somebody go to the home, like a clinician or the support group leader. And while you're waiting.
Yeah, I was just going to say, while Alonzo gets back to us about the health home services, something I know you talk about a lot, Vanessa, is establishing kind of ground rules and norms. So could you talk a little bit about how that might assist us in this situation?
Yeah, this is a little bit different, but I'll go back to what we had talked about before. And that I call it mediation, because sometimes we're not aware of our effect on other people. So it could be that the group support group facilitator talks one-on-one with Deborah, as some people have already suggested, and talk one-on-one with the group leader separately. And then if both women are willing to allow that group leader to share in general terms what's going on in the support group, that might help. That might help Deborah to realize the impact that she's having on the group. Not that it's her fault, but just that she realizes, because sometimes when we're deep in our own need, we don't realize what impact we're having on other people. And vice versa with the popular opinion leader. And bringing that resolution to the entire group, because we have to remember, it may not just be Deborah, it may not just be that leader. It may be other women in the group who are having feelings, but don't really know how to share that. And so it'd be good to try to check in with them as well and ask them what they think is going on as well. And seeing if we could come up with a consensus on how we will resolve the group in terms of keeping that group together. But also I'd be mindful that sometimes that's impossible. And that, as some of you have suggested, that might mean that Deborah has to do additional work before she's reunited with the group. But if that is the case, and Deborah is asked to do some additional work outside of the group, that the group, this is one of the things that happens with groups. Sometimes that happens and we don't tell the group what's happening. And then they make up stories. And then rumors start, and then it just causes a lot of confusion where there shouldn't be any. There should be a general way just to talk about the fact that Deborah's going to leave the group for a minute and she'll be back.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think it's very important, like you said, to try to be as transparent with the group as possible, what's going on, without revealing too much of her personal information. Another suggestion that we saw in here, I believe from Diane, is potentially, trying to find, like you said, Vanessa, one of those opinion leaders or one of those sort of popular leaders within the group who might be willing to mentor or support her individually if someone is willing to kind of, take that on, not in a therapeutic sense, not that they would be her counselor or her therapist, but just a friend who may have gone through something similar, I think would be a very good idea as well.
And while you're reading, I'm going to just point out something. Yeah. Now, let's suppose that the popular opinion leader doesn't leave the group and they become disruptive. Their body language is such that every time Deborah starts to speak, they start squirming in the chair, or they start sidebar conversations with their someone else they like in the group because they really just can't take it. During that point in time, we may have to enlist other tools to deal with that situation. And it's what I call the rule of three. Because like bad hair days, everybody has bad days. So it could be the popular opinion leaders having a bad day. And this is where your group rules and agreements are going to come in. And if everybody knows that, you know what, we're going to give you 3 chances to get it together before we have to take action, that might help the group self-regulate itself. Particularly always, and I know that all of you do this because you all seem very seasoned in terms of your facilitation of always reading those group rules and agreements before the start of the session. That way people are mindful and remember. And the other one is group cohesiveness. Like if we have to make a decision about a person's participation, do you do that through a democratic process? Is that consensus? Or is that by polling? Because a lot of times women do not want to be confrontational with one another, but that's another way of getting feedback from how they think the group is doing.
Yes, absolutely. And Alonzo got back to us talking about those home health services. So basically, it's just kind of what I thought. It gives you a care manager to work with you one-on-one, so that person could work with Deborah to address all her needs and problems, and, you know, her emotional needs as well as her daily functioning. So it's kind of like a case management service, and you know, that might be what she needs in this situation. Her needs might be kind of beyond the scope of the group at this point. But obviously, you know, it's very imperative to create a welcoming environment where she would be welcome back when she deals with those needs.
And I would just reiterate, thanks, those are all great suggestions. Thank you very much. And I will just reiterate what some of you have already said to remind the group of what it was, how maybe they shared their stories about what it was like for them to be newly diagnosed. So Deborah really truly feels that she is not by herself. I know that will take people back, but it also points out to Deborah that there is room, that there's growth, that she will pass, this too shall pass once she's ready for it to do so.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that really echoes a lot of the things we've seen in the chat as well. Some people specifically saying, you know, let her know that this is something that a lot of people have to go through, you know, when they first get diagnosed. Absolutely. So any other thoughts or feelings on this scenario before we move on to the Q&A? Oh, and Alonzo says it's also key to find out if HIV was the only diagnosis that she was given. Absolutely. So kind of, again, maybe this would be good in a one-on-one conversation or a case management situation where investigating, you know, what are the other things that are going on with her? Does she have another diagnosis or something else outside, perhaps an abusive relationship that's, you know, making her act in a certain way or preventing her from kind of being emotionally available for the other women in the group.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so if nobody has any other comments on that, thank you so much for your participation in that activity. What we are going to be doing next is the Q&A. So I'm going to stop sharing my PowerPoint screen so I can pull up the Q&A box. So again, on the bottom bar of your Zoom window here, you will be able to see a Q&A box, and it should have a place for you to type in questions. So any questions you have for us about group facilitation, whether it's on-site or virtual, you can type those in the Q&A box now, and Vanessa and I will try to answer them to the best of our abilities. And again, if we don't get to every single person's question, we will be sending you out an email after this, and we'll try to answer them in there. So I'll give everyone a minute to do that.
And if we don't get anything soon, I have a couple of questions I want to ask you all.
Okay.
While we're waiting for questions, let me ask you one for those of you who are still on the phone with us, and thank you for staying with us. First is, do you think that there's a need to have a learning community for support group leaders where we can share documents like group agreements and protocols or best practice tips, lessons learned? I see yes. Absolutely. Yes, yes, yes. And so how often do you think that we should do that? And what format?
All right, so while those answers are coming in with people saying yes, we actually have a question, Vanessa.
Okay.
So the question is from an anonymous attendee. If you don't have funding, so i.e. you're not a 501c3, and you don't have access to a clinician, how does one properly facilitate a support group basically without that support from the clinician? I've tried, but I haven't been effective.
That is an excellent question, as all the questions have been. And I wish I had an answer for you. But one of the ways you might be able to get some support is through the American Psychological Association. They have a volunteer program of graduate students who are in psychological programs or psychology programs, getting their degree in psychology. You might be able to get a volunteer to help you with that group. You'd have to contact the American Psychological Association and tell them where you're located in the United States, and if they have any graduate students who are going for their master's or PhD that need an internship. That's one way of doing it. We've done that in the past. There's also something called SCORE, SCORE, that's through the Small Business Bureau, it may not be through the small business, but it's a volunteer. It's for folks who are in retirement who want to give back to the community. You might find some folks who are social workers or case managers or in the field of psychology that would be willing to volunteer their time and effort to support you in that, and at least talk you through that, or be of support to you as you move through the process yourself. I hope that helped.
All right, so we also have Christian in the chat mentioning that it can be very hard to find trainings for facilitators or peer trainings, and asking if you know of any HIV seminars or conventions or trainings that they might be able to attend.
Yes, the best place that I would go to for group facilitation skills is your State Department of Health. Each of them runs like HIV educational trainings. I always see group facilitation as one of those trainings. And also we promise after this webinar, give me a day or two, that there are some other resources that you can access for group facilitation. Some are paid and some are unpaid. So if you have a professional development fund at your organization, this is one of the things that I would ask for in terms of your own professional development that the organization sponsors. Some are expensive and some are not expensive. But I would try with the state health department because those trainings are free.
Mm. All right, great. Yes, definitely. Like I said, we will be sending out a follow-up email. It will probably be either tomorrow or at the beginning of next week. Just because we want to get those resources. Probably more the beginning of next week. But I wanted to answer another question. So from Kamaria, who is asking, can you provide a list of well-received topics for support groups? Right now, the ones I keep hearing are PrEP, disclosure, viral load, U=U, family planning, etc. So I can speak to that a little bit. So in our client needs survey, which I've brought up multiple times throughout this webinar, we asked the women, what are your favorite topics to discuss? And as I think I mentioned before, a lot of them said, it's good for me to learn about U=U, and it's good for me to learn about PrEP and disclosure, but I don't only want to talk about HIV. I want to talk about other things going on in my life that are adjacent to my HIV diagnosis. So I think it would be a good idea to talk about other things like family or relationships. I know in one of our groups, talking about self-care was very well received, talking about how the women relax. We've been talking about the holidays and how there are some stressors around that, particularly if your family doesn't know your status. So talking about things that are HIV adjacent, but not, what is your viral load and things like that. I think good topics. And as some other people in our question earlier, also breaking up those more serious topics about PrEP and U=U and adherence with some more fun activities like the vision boards or, maybe getting coffee or being in a new environment.
And can I just respond to Kristen? That was a great response. I love those topics. Kristen, there's 3 conferences for all you folks that know. The Ryan White HIV/AIDS conference is coming up in December. That's a free conference, and it's in Washington, D.C. I would look on the website, HRSA website, which is Health Resources Services Administration, and look at their agenda and see if they have any workshops that they may be having. I know, I say this because Veronica and her team did a great job at the United States Conference on AIDS, which is going to be happening again in Washington, D.C. in September of 2019. And then also look on the website for the Centers for Disease Control's National HIV Prevention Conference, where they might look at their agenda, look at those 3 conferences, because they may have something on support group facilities.
Yes, that's definitely all really good options, Vanessa. And then just to close this out, because there's a few more questions coming in, but Ernesto is asking, probably the last question we're going to answer, are presentations of a topic, maybe an educational topic, during the first 20 minutes a good idea? And I don't know what you think about this, Vanessa, but I personally think it is a good idea. We do that at our Iris House group sometimes. We have people come in and maybe present about U equals U, because a lot of individuals still don't know about that, unfortunately. And then you can kind of, talk about it afterward. Or as a lot of people were saying, you kind of have the educational bit up front and then a little bit more of a fun or entertaining bit near the end, so that women can stay engaged with that. But I definitely think it's good, like you suggested, Ernesto, to make it sort of brief, because women or any individual attending a support group is not going to want to listen to an hour, 2-hour long presentation.
Because they want to talk.
Yes, exactly. All right, everyone. So we are close to the end of our time. We only have about 1 minute left. So I just wanted to thank everyone for being on the webinar today. We are going to be sending out a satisfaction or survey at the end of this. Again, you should probably be getting that one tomorrow. And then Vanessa and I are going to compile an email with some sources and information that we should be sending out at the beginning of next week, hopefully. And I just wanted to really encourage everyone to ensure that they're filling out the little survey that we're going to send out, so that we can make sure that we're getting your feedback, and that we can continue doing these webinars in the future. And if you have any questions or concerns or anything like that, like I said, I'm going to be sending you an email, but I'm also going to share my screen one more time and just show my email address. So just give me one moment to pull up the PowerPoint. So my email is on this last page here. It's vkarp@irishouse.org. If you have any questions, feel free to get in touch with me. All right, great. So thank you very much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day and have a happy Thanksgiving.
Bye-bye. Hey, I'm going to call you.